High levels of immigration make it impossible to build a cohesive society, Theresa May has warned. The Home Secretary told the Conservative Party conference Britain does not need net migration at current levels, saying the net economic effect was close to zero at best. Prime Minister David Cameron said he agreed with her comments. Ms. May also announced changes to the way asylum claims are handled and defended student visa curbs. Net migration into the UK currently stands at a record high, reaching 330,000 in the year to March. In other developments, Boris Johnson, seen as a potential Conservative leadership rival to Ms. May, is expected to say welfare reforms must protect low-paid workers. Mr. Cameron told BBC Radio 4's Today programme Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn does not see the risk posed by so-called Islamic State. The PM also defended tax credit changes after Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt suggested they would persuade people to work hard. The UK's ban on prisoners' rights to vote looks set to continue after a European ruling. Parents in England who refuse to pay a penalty after their children play truant will have their child benefit docked. Live updates, Conservative conference with speeches from Zach Goldsmith and Boris Johnson. BBC Assistant Political Editor Norman Smith said Ms. May's comments on immigration were extraordinarily tough and utterly uncompromising. Addressing the party conference in Manchester, she said refugees should not be conflated with economic migrants. The desire for a better life is perfectly understandable, she said, but there is a limit to the amount of immigration any country can and should take. Controls are needed, she said, because when immigration is too high, when the pace of change is too fast, it's impossible to build a cohesive society. It's difficult for schools and hospitals and core infrastructure like housing and transport to cope. Wages are also forced down and some people forced out of work altogether, she added, but even if we could manage all the consequences of mass immigration, Britain does not need net migration in the hundreds of thousands every year. Ms. May said immigrants could fill skills gaps, but said not every person coming to Britain right now is a skilled electrician, engineer, or doctor. She said evidence showed that at best the net economic and fiscal effect of high immigration is close to zero and that there was no case, in the national interest, for immigration of the scale we have experienced over the last decade. The Home Secretary hit back at critics of her planned crackdown on student visas, saying too many students were not returning when their visas run out. So I don't care what the university lobbyists say, the rules must be enforced. Students, yes. Overstayers, no. And the universities must make this happen. She also promised a new approach to asylum claims, including tougher treatment for people who have traveled to the UK from other safe countries. The first ever annual asylum strategy will be published next year, she said, along with a register of people and organizations able to accommodate refugees. The Home Secretary also strayed beyond her portfolio and called for RAF airstrikes in Syria, saying terrorists there have taken the conscious decision to make themselves our enemies. They plan to attack our country and kill our citizens. And they need to know, even if they are British nationals, that if they plan to do harm to this country, if they want to take the lives of British citizens, we will make sure that they have no place to hide. Ministers have admitted missing their target to reduce net migration below 100,000, blaming the scale of migration from within the EU. Speaking on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Mr. Cameron said he agreed with Ms. May's comments on the subject, saying integrating new arrivals was more difficult if you have excessive levels of migration. The PM also said he was incredibly proud the UK had built one of the most successful multiracial, multi-ethnic democracies anywhere in the world. But he said that for an integrated, successful society you have to make sure there are enough school places and that hospitals aren't overcrowded. According to the latest figures released in August, net migration of EU citizens was 183,000, up 53,000 from the year ending March 2014. The number of those arriving from countries outside the EU was still larger, with net migration measured at 196,000, up 39,000 on a year earlier. Ministers said the figures were deeply disappointing. BBC political correspondent Alex Forsyth says that with talk of who might succeed Mr Cameron continuing on conference sidelines, both Ms May and Mr Johnson's speeches would be closely watched for signs of any leadership ambitions. The London mayor and Conservative MP will warn that any welfare and tax reforms must not reduce support for the hardest working and lowest paid. Shops workers, cleaners, the people who get up in the small hours or work through the night because they have dreams for what their families can achieve, the people without whom the London economy would simply collapse, he will say. These are the people Labour is leaving behind, and then there is an even more important requirement. Because if Labour is once again becoming the party that pointlessly bashes the rich, it is we who give everyone the tools to make their own lives and their own successes.